Hello, this is Angelia, and you're listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do, the podcast that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. Today we're going to be talking about normative issues and tasks. Those are the issues and tasks that are, normal for everybody. Whereas trait models emphasize the fundamental stability of the personality structure, and again, we talked about that the other day. Your personality does stay fairly stable. Over time, there's some theories that say by the time you're 8, your personality is developed. That's not true because you're always developing and learning. But your base personality, who you are, basically, starts cementing at that point. Other models, such as Baltez's lifespan developmental approach, look for factors that may contribute to personal growth. And that is the number one way our personalities can change as we go into late adulthood, is personal growth. You grow as a person, you expand your horizons, your spiritual self, your mental self, your emotional self, your physical self. And, that can help you feel more integrated and whole as a person. According to normative stage theorists, growth depends on carrying out the psychological tasks of each stage of life in emotionally healthy ways. So, we talked about this when we were talking about, kids, about the emotional growth, that a lot of people don't think about the emotional growth, but in order to be a healthy person, there not only is physical growth, but there's emotional growth and mental growth and spiritual growth. So, in each stage that you go through, there's no one way for every person. We're all unique. And some person might go through one stage when they're 2 and another might not go through the same stage until they're 30. So, everyone's different. But, you have to go through these things in an emotionally healthy way before you can move on. I'm sure if you've heard the psychobabble, people use the word stuck. And people can get stuck in certain spots. So until you navigate those spots in a healthy way emotionally, you are kind of stuck. But, I don't like to use psychobabble because I feel like that discounts the actual science. For Erickson, the crowning achievement of late adulthood is a sense of ego integrity. So your ego is integrated. You have all of your parts and the ego's in that. Some folks, that never happens, but that is, an ideal that it should. Or integrity of the self, who you are as a person. An achievement based on reflection about one's life. So, in order to reach that stage, you have to be able to reflect on your life and resolve that in your own emotional self in order to be able to move on. In the 8th and final stage of the lifespan, ego integrity versus despair, and I'll tell you what that means so you know. According to Erickson, the 8th and final stage of the psychosocial development in which people in late adulthood either achieve a sense of integrity of the self by accepting the lives they have lived, and thus accept death, or they yield to despair that their lives cannot be relived. So basically that's going to mean you're either going to be a person at peace with the life you lived or a person depressed about the life you lived. So the choice is yours. Older adults need to evaluate, what happened? Why did it happen? What does this mean to me? You have to evaluate your life. Sum up, you have to be able to say, well, this is my life, and name, basically from birth to that point, what happened, why it happened, how you feel about it, sum it up. And accept their lives. You have to accept your life. It's the life you lived. You might not have liked it, so much. You might have wished it was different, But you have to come to terms with it and say, oh well, that was my life. I accept it. It was what it was. So as to accept the approach of death. Because you want to die in peace. You don't want to have unfinished business. You don't want to, be a burden and a drama. You want to die in peace. So by doing these things, when your final time comes, you can be at peace. Building on the outcomes of the 7 previous stages, they struggle to achieve a sense of coherence and wholeness. So you have to have a sense that everything was strung together. This led to this led to this, and that you are whole as a person. If you're not, you need to go make that happen because that's the only way you're going to end up happy. But, you have to accept your life as it was. And if it's not what you want it to be, then you can take steps to make it what you want it to be. Rather than give way to despair over their inability to relive the past differently. Because let's face it, we can't. We can't go back in the past and fix things. I'm sure we wish we could. I know I wish I could. There would be some stuff I'd be fixing. But, we can't do that. So we have to accept it for what it was. It's like, well, okay, if sucky stuff happened, well, that was sucky stuff, but it happened, and, I moved past it, I got over it, got on, I'm doing a thing to, help other people who, may have had stuff like this happen to them, and so they don't feel so alone, and so they might have a model to look at and say, oh, well, if she got through this and did that, well, I can too. Like my friend said, we help where we can. But, we can't live our past life differently, so we have to come to terms with it. Now, someday they might invent time travel, maybe you can go back, but then you might, if you're a Star Trek fan, that might mess up the whole timeline, and you may screw up the whole world. So, you probably won't do that. People who succeed in this final integrative task gain a sense of the order and meaning of their lives, within the larger social order. Because you are a part of society, whether you want to be or not. There are people who don't want to be, but you are. Everything you do is a drop in the bucket, and it sends out ripples. You affect your family, you affect your friends, you affect the people you work with, you affect the people you come in contact with, you affect your neighbors, you affect your pets. You are a part of society, whether you want to think you are or not. The past, again, you got to come to terms with the past. It happened. If you're in denial, it's going to cause you problems. That's why when people repress things, it comes back to haunt them later. And so you got to come to terms with the past. Your present. Where are you at now? What is your life now? How do you want your life to be now? If it's not what you want it to be, then you need to make it what you want it to be. And future. You need to make plans for the future. We've got plans, and we have a couple of variables. Well, if this happens, this is what we'll do. If that happens, this is what we'll do. But, you have plans so that you have a future to look forward to. The virtue that may develop during this stage is wisdom. We talked about wisdom before. Wisdom is basically learning all you can, knowing all you can. Some people are born with a type of wisdom to where they're very thoughtful. They can just come up with a very thoughtful, reason. My middle son, he's very thoughtful. He is a very wise soul. As I say, he's been around before, and my little one too. But they're very wise. They have a way about them to, they cut through the, if you want to call it illusions of life, to the heart of the problem of things. And so, wisdom is different things to different people. But overall, it's wise to accept your life, evaluate it, deal with it, and move on. An informed and detached concern with life itself in the face of death itself. So, again, you don't want to go with unfinished business. So, the best thing is look at your past, sort it out, go to therapy if you need it, take out your garbage, and then deal with your present. What is my life now? If this is not the life you want now, make the life you want now. And then make plans for the future. And then by doing that, you become a whole person, a unified, integrated person, and a happy person, and maybe even a wise person in the deal. Wisdom, said Erickson, means accepting the life one has lived. Because, like I say, you have to. You lived it, it's there. You can't, pretend it's not there, or you might end up in a mental institute somewhere. But, accept it, deal with it. Without major regrets. And we all have regrets, let's face it, we do. There's something, maybe you should have done that you didn't do, or maybe you shouldn't have done that you did do. But, we all have regrets. Without dwelling on should have dones or might have beens. And a lot of people do that. A lot of people spend their whole life thinking about something that happened to them 50 years ago. What they should have done, or they might have been this if they'd have done this. And, that's no way to live your life. It involves accepting one's parents as people who did the best that they could and thus deserve love. Now, some people have a problem with that. I've honestly had a little problem with that. But both of my parents told me later on that they did the best they could. They thought they were doing the right thing. And if you think about their parents, how they did things, and their parents, how they did things are passed down generationally. And what their wisdom was at the time might be different from what our wisdom is at the time. Conventional wisdom changes with each generation. And that's why I prefer to be post-conventional. It's like, well, what makes sense? As far as everything's involved, psychology, medical, doctors, how people, feel about everything. So your parents might not have been the best ones, but if they weren't, you can always become your own best parent. If they weren't, you might want to go to a psychologist, do some inner child work. That's great. That, helped me, and take out that garbage and realize your parents were people too. They made mistakes. Yes, they did. And no one's had the perfect childhood. I mean, I've seen people that had pretty good one, and even they are, I wish I could do this or that. So no one's had it perfect. Never going to happen. So realize that your parents did the best they could with what they had. And that includes their mindset and their ability to love, and their beliefs. So think about that. And even if you can't be with a parent because they did something horrific to you, you can at least be compassionate and understanding. You don't have to let them into your life if they were horrifically abused. I've heard some really bad horror stories. If someone did that to you, you can just choose to love them from afar. You don't have to be near them close enough where those are horrible memories that are just going to come up every time you see them. So, and like I say, my mom and I, we didn't have a good relationship for the first 40 years of my life. But finally we came together over actually some trauma that we had in common. And she became my best friend for the last 5 years of her life. We were doing everything together. We went out to lunch together. We went shopping together. And I'm glad I had those 5 years, because some people never have that. They never have any years. So I'm happy for that. And since she's been gone, my dad talks to me a lot more. So he's actually gotten to know me, a little bit. Before, he never knew me. He didn't know me. He didn't care. But, now he's gotten to know me a little bit. And he realizes I'm not the, dumb loser that he thought I was. So, we can deal with that and accept that our parents were people too, and just move on. Even though they were not perfect, of course, it implies accepting one's death as the inevitable and end of a life lived, as well as one knew how to live it. because someday you are going to die. If you're alive, you're going to die. Sorry to break the news if you didn't know that already. But if you live the best life you know how, and do everything you want to do, and try everything you want to try, then you won't have any regrets. You won't have any unfinished business, and you're going to die happy. I mean, isn't that a great alternative to dying unhappy? I think it is. In sum, it means accepting imperfection in the self, because you're not perfect, and we all know, that you're not perfect because we're not perfect. So, in your parents, because they're imperfect people too. And in life is not going to be perfect. It's not going to be perfectly how you want it every time. It might get close sometimes, and it does sometimes. But then it might be pretty far from it sometimes, to where you're like, oh my gosh, and you're disappointed because you wanted one thing to happen, but another thing happened. Or you wanted this thing, but you end up with this thing. So life is never going to be perfect. And when you can deal with that fact, then it's easier for you to accept and be grateful for the life that you do have. This definition of wisdom as an important psychological resource differs from the largely cognitive definition. So, that, cognitive definition is where, wisdom as far as, somebody's really wise. And here what they're talking about is accepting, the imperfections in yourself, your parents, and your life. That is wise to do, because if you dwell on how everything was not perfect for you, then you're going to be unhappy. You have to learn to be accepting and grateful. People who do not achieve acceptance are overwhelmed by despair. So, if you don't achieve acceptance of your life as it was, you're going to be in despair. And like I said, that's not a good way to be when the day comes. Realizing that time is too short to seek other roads to ego integrity. Because once you get into a late adulthood, there are things you can still do and go into, but, if it's too late and you can't do these things anymore, then that's too late. So that's why I tell everyone, now is the time to take steps to make the life you want. Although integrity must outweigh despair if this stage is to be resolved successfully. So that is the successful into this stage in life. Acceptance versus despair. If you can accept, this was my life. Yeah, may not have been great, but it was mine. This is where I'm at. This is how things went. And you have to accept that's your life. Or you can sit around and be depressed and in despair about it. And that's going to get you absolutely nowhere but miserable. Erickson maintained that some despair is inevitable, because of course it is. We're all going to have disappointments in life, and nobody has not had disappointments in life. Even Jesus had disappointments in life with people and, fig trees and things. So, we're going to have disappointments too. And, you just have to deal with it. Like I told my kids, roll with the punches, man. Somebody knocks you down, get back up, keep moving. That's the best thing you can do, because it's going to happen. Life's going to kick your booty. That's just the world. It'd be great if everything went how we wanted it to, but it's not going to do that. Especially since the powers of the other team have come down here to be with us. And as one of my favorite sayings is, the devil's a hater. So we're not going to be super happy all the time. So you're going to have to learn to deal with that, get knocked down, brush yourself off, and get back up and keep moving. People need to mourn, not only for their own misfortunes, and you have to. You have to come to terms with your own misfortunes. You have to mourn. And in inner child work, that's one of the things they teach you, is it's okay to cry for your inner child. You can think about, if that was my child, I would never do that to my child. I would never say that to my child. So you can cry for your inner child, that they were treated the way they were treated, and that will help you mourn for your child, your childhood, and move on. And lost chances. again, we all have a chance that we could have taken. I remember I was at a flea market, and this woman said, "Oh man, I like your jewelry. That's what you should be doing. If you decide to do that, you can come into business with me." And she gave me a business card, but I lost it over the years. I never, thought much about it. And then her store ended up closing, and so I never was able to do that. And I think, well, if I'd have known, because later on my jewelry was selling at booths all the time, I could have went into business with her. I could have been in the store with her, but at the time, I didn't have the self-esteem. I didn't think what I was doing was good, or like what I was wearing was like maybe the best thing that I had done, and the rest of it would be crap, and she wouldn't want it, because I was not in a good relationship with my husband at that point in time, or I was, not happy with work, and so my self-esteem was probably about that big. So I didn't take that chance. But, I did think about that a few times, like, I wish I would have. But the facts are I didn't. And when I thought about it, I realized I wasn't in a place to do that, And you have to forgive yourself for not being in a place to do that in any given moment. Because if you're not ready mentally, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, physically, to do a thing, then you're not going to do it, So you can't beat yourself up for decisions that you didn't make that would have been in your best interest if you know that in that moment you weren't in the mindset or heart set or whatever to make that decision. But for the vulnerability and transience of the human condition, because let's face it, we are vulnerable. We could die at any minute. We could be destroyed. There was a video and, we accidentally saw it and I was like, oh no, of where this guy was working on a building and a beam fell on him and he was just crushed. Just gone, So at any moment, any of us could have something similar happen, and then we're just gone. So life is fragile. The human condition changes from moment to moment, year to year, generation to generation. It's transient. If you think about all the big societies that came up, the Persian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Roman Empire, gone. But at one point in time, they were ruling the world. But now, they're gone. So even society itself is transient. So if you can think about that and accept that, it's like, well, time moves on. It stands still for no one, no empire, no world. And just come to terms with that, then you're going to have a better grip, on acceptance and happiness in old age than someone who's holding on tight and despairing that, my life was not what I wanted it to be. Yet Erickson believed, even as the body's functions weaken, and if you live long enough, they're going to, people must maintain a vital involvement in society. And it's proven extroverts are happier. People who get out and socialize and get involved in something are happier than people who don't. And if you're naturally an introvert, that's just a fact. And you might not be able to get out and socialize, but you can get involved in, current events. You can, maybe volunteer if you can do that maybe once a week, once a month. Give yourself a little exposure to society. Go out, and eat and go to movies, things where other people are around so you don't feel isolated. Excuse me. On the basis of studies of life histories of people in their 80s, he concluded that ego integrity comes not just from reflecting on the past, but, as with Jimmy Carter, from continued stimulation and challenge. So, as you age, you need to have continued stimulation. You need to keep your brain busy, yourself busy. You can't just let yourself rot away. That's what you're going to do, is rot away. And challenge yourself. Learn something new. Study a language, read books, do something that's going to, keep you busy. Do a little workout routine, take a walk. Start trying to walk a little further every day. Challenge yourself. Keep yourself vital. Whether through political activity, that's some people choose. Some people, they get older, they decide they're going into politics. And it's like, more power to you. Fitness programs. They have silver sneakers around here. I don't know if they have that where you are. But they have silver sneakers where the older folks go and they walk around a mall, or they go to a park and walk around. That's something you can do. Creative work. There's a lot of people who haven't fully delved into creative work because they had to work the 9 to 5 and all, raise the kids. So now is a good time to take that back up and do that. Or relationships with grandchildren. I don't have any yet. I have a almost step granddaughter. My son marries her. She'll be my granddaughter. But he's dating a woman, living with a woman who has a child. I think she's his greatest thing, and she likes me too. So it's cool. And maybe someday, my youngest one just got engaged, so maybe someday. But I have friends who've already become great grandparents, and they got the kind of thing where they started young. They started in their 20s, and then they got in their 40s, and their kids were having kids, and they're in their pushing 60 now. Now their kids are having kids. Like, whoa, your family's busy. But this happens. But I love little people, so I know I'm going to be a great grandma. It's going to be fun for me. Research inspired by Erikson's theory supports the importance men and women place on striving for ego integrity and late adulthood. So it is important to get your stuff together in late adulthood. Your ego integrity is going to make a difference in your happiness. If you get yourself integrated and whole and come to terms with the past, present, and future, you're going to have a happier time of it versus someone who's sitting around and being sad, angry, unhappy, and feeling like life's done everything to me, but, what about me? It's like, well, yeah, your life might have done everything to you, but it's your job to overcome that and take steps forward. So, that's what we have to teach on normative issues and tasks in late adulthood. Hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching or listening. That's all for now. Until next time.